Good morning and welcome to the San Francisco Interfaith Council online briefing for community and faith partners. Today's program welcomes newly appointed American Red Cross Regional CEO, Hanna Malak. Thanks. The San Francisco Interfaith Council online briefings are supported by a grant from MetaFund. Thank you. The important and ongoing work of the San Francisco Interfaith Council would not be possible without generous funding from congregations, corporations, faith-based social service agencies, foundations, judicatories, and supporters like you. Help us spread the word. Visit sfinterfaithcouncil.org to learn about SFIC programming and how to become a supporter. Follow SFIC on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to SFIC's YouTube channel to watch all of our virtual events. A bit of housekeeping. Today's program is being recorded. For audio and video, all participants are muted and without video to minimize distraction. To submit a question or comment, select the chat button at the bottom of your screen and send a message to Q&A. Questions will be forwarded to the presenter and answered time permitting. To activate closed captions, select the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and click Enable Live Transcription. There's no time like the present for San Franciscans to prepare for changes in the virus by taking basic actions that can protect themselves, their families, and their community. The San Francisco Department of Public Health urges people to be ready for COVID by staying up to date on their vaccinations, knowing how to reach their doctor, keeping a supply of COVID tests, keeping masks handy, planning ahead for a possible infection, and staying informed with trusted sources of information such as sf.gov/COVID. The Department of Public Health recommends the following for keeping congregations safe during COVID. Continue to gather. Keep in mind your congregation's demographics. Encourage vaccines and boosters. Wear masks indoors. Reinforce the stay home if sick message, provide testing resources, and share Be COVID ready messaging found at sf.gov/be-covid-ready. For more information, call 628-652-2700. The COVID vaccines are safe, effective, and open to everyone 6 months and older. Boosters to everyone 5 months and older, and the updated booster to everyone 12 years and older. Mpox vaccines and boosters are now available to those exposed and to certain eligible groups. Go to sf.gov for more information on vaccines. Now is the time to come together, San Francisco. Together we can stop Asian discrimination, bias, hate, and violence. The COVID-19 virus has no race or nationality. It is simply a disease. To report a hate crime, call the SFPD at 415-553-1133. And at this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to the Executive Director of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Michael Pappas. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trey. Good morning. I'm Michael Pappas, and on behalf of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, I want to welcome you to this week's online briefing for community and faith partners. On the heels of the city's appeal to faith leaders to host what would emerge as the Interfaith Winter Shelter, San Francisco suffered the greatest natural disaster since the 1906 earthquake. The Loma Prieta Earthquake literally shook our city's infrastructure, emotional metal, and exacerbated the homeless crisis. It was in the aftermath of Loma Prieta that humanitarian aid organization Church World Service made overtures to San Francisco faith leaders to assist in distributing monies to vulnerable sectors displaced by the earthquake, that the San Francisco Interfaith Council was officially birthed. Because of this course of events and the general expectation that houses of worship are on standby to offer shelter, food, and pastoral care in times of crises, that disaster preparedness, response, and recovery became additional core missions of the San Francisco Interfaith Council. As no one sector can respond to crises alone, the SFIC is blessed to collaborate with tried, trusted, and committed partners. Among them is the American Red Cross. This week's online briefing for community and faith partners, hosted by the SFIC, welcomes newly appointed American Red Cross Regional CEO Hanna Malak who will speak to his vision and the organization's priorities and programs with a focus on its work with communities of faith in San Francisco. It is now my great pleasure and privilege to introduce San Francisco Interfaith Council board member, San Francisco Human Rights Commissioner, and dear friend and representative of the Muslim community, Hala Hijazi, to read the opening SFIC statement as well as to ground us in a reflective moment. Hala, we welcome you. Thank you for being with us. I know this is precious time and we feel blessed that you're here today.
Thank you, Michael. I would like to read the interfaith statement first. This is an interfaith community. Whatever our individual belief, it can be freely expressed here with no apologies. If we are invited to offer prayer in this setting, it should be offered according to the tradition with which we identify. If we are invited to speak on a subject from the perspective of our tradition, we are free to do so without fear of offending those who come from another tradition. We come together as people of faith to learn from each other that we might better understand the multiplicity of faith with traditions in our city and in our world. And now I'd like to give my blessings and my reflection on this meeting. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, we are blessed with another beautiful day to acknowledge the oneness of our Almighty God, His love, His mercy, and His abundance of favors and blessings upon all of us. This week, we were physically shook and reminded how vulnerable we are just after a 5.1 earthquake that originated in the South Bay, and how the next big one is coming, and the critical roles that the public and private partners and stakeholders will play in disaster preparedness, multiple response operations, and recovery. The national partnership between the American Red Cross, interfaith community, and houses of worship and public agencies are crucial to ongoing community coordinations and preparations, the offering of emergency and safe shelter, food and clothing, the organizing of blood drives, religious care services, and the mental and emotional health care. Each one of you in this work, whether you are fighting an enemy you can see or an enemy you cannot see, you're fighting knowing the dignity and the lives and livelihoods of many, including our marginalized communities, are counting on you to do it with integrity, equity, and justice in mind. We may not be in the military, nonetheless, our mission saves lives. You are the heart and soul of our city, who selflessly ensure and safeguard our security and our stability. So we come together today to express our profound gratitude for the sacrifices and contributions you have made on the battlefields, which are the streets of San Francisco, in our houses of worship, and in the city halls. Almighty God, you know every volunteer, clergy, and every veteran by name. You know their deeds, their hard work, and their perseverance. You know their needs, both material and spiritual. Please draw each one closer to you and grant them the blessings and peace in their hearts. Jesus, you said once that there's no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Today we pray for the men and women who have in their service sacrificed time, strength, ambition, health, and even their lives on this earth to benefit friends, known and unknown. As Muslims and people of faith, we are comforted by the blessed words in the Quran and Hadiths. O mankind, I have created you from male and female and made you into tribes and into nations so that you know each other, not that you may despise one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of God is the most righteous of you. None of you have faith until you love for your brother what you love for yourself, and hate for your brother what you hate for yourself. Believers in the mutual kindness, compassion, and sympathy are just like one body. When one of the limbs suffers, the whole body responds to it with wakefulness and fever. Almighty God, we are one body. Renew in us the bonds of unity in diversity, most merciful of the merciful. Increase in us the spirit of compassion and the gift of understanding, and remove from our hearts the shadow of hatred. May God bless and protect us all, and may God bless and protect the city of St. Francis. Thank you, and excited to hear from Hanna.
Thank you so much, Hala. Your words could not be more timely or more powerful, and continue to do the good things that you do and offer the leadership that you do. It's a blessing to our council and our city. Well, I've had the good privilege of working with a number of directors of the San Francisco area Red Cross in my 15 years, and some of them have really understood the culture of the Red Cross and been embedded in it. Others have thought out of the box innovatively. I had the good fortune of welcoming Hanna to our headquarters at the Presidio's main post chapel last week. And what impressed me about our time together, very quickly, I realized that he combined not only those qualities, because he is somebody who has worked in the trenches at the Red Cross, but also outside of the area as well for the Red Cross, but he's homegrown here and understands the Bay Area like very few do. And I think that that is probably a really key quality to success. I thought it'd be really important to welcome him by introducing him to our interfaith partners and our community partners on this show. And quite honestly, I couldn't, the timing could not have been better. I was here at this computer when the earth shook this week, and my China cabinet was letting me know that. And it was just a reminder, as Hala so eloquently said, of our fragility and our need to prepare in advance. So with that, Hanna, we welcome you. The floor is yours, and you're here among family and friends. And so I turn the mic over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, and really appreciate the partnerships that we have with the Interfaith Council and our other faith-based partners. This morning, I thought I would tell you just a little bit more about myself, and then we'll talk about the mission of the Red Cross and ways that we're working with our faith-based organizations here in San Francisco and across our region. To get started, I want to tell you my why and why I'm so passionate about the mission of the Red Cross. And that's because my older brother, Charlie, had leukemia growing up. He received multiple blood transfusions as he was going through treatment. He is alive, he's well, he's a nurse practitioner now. This was a photo of my mom and dad at his white coat ceremony as he officially became a nurse practitioner. He can be a pain in my neck sometimes, but it's a pain that I welcome. But again, he would not be here if it wasn't for the Red Cross, our very dedicated and generous blood donors, and our staff and volunteers who make the magic happen. So I just wanted to start with that, just to tell you kind of the reason that drives me and brings the passion to our work. I have had a very, very fun career at the Red Cross. I born and raised in San Mateo, went to St. Timothy's Elementary School, and then Junipero Serra High School. Did my undergrad at Menlo College in Menlo Park in Atherton, where I was introduced to the Red Cross through the Red Cross Collegiate Leadership Program, where I was able to go to Washington, D.C., where our national headquarters are, and learn about the Red Cross, and then in turn come back and host blood drives on our campus. I joined our Blood Services Board of Directors at the time, and then joined the National Youth Council, representing youth across the country for the Red Cross. In 2012, I joined the Red Cross as a paid staff. I moved from a volunteer to a paid staff in our blood donor recruitment department. I covered Santa Cruz and Monterey counties and was working with groups, corporations, businesses, schools, faith-based organizations to host blood drives in the community. Did that for a couple of years, moved into the San Jose area, moved into our Oakland office, again, doing donor recruitment, and then finally our San Francisco office. We started a blood drive at our office here on Market and Goff in Hayes Valley. It collected about 20 units, and we did it once a quarter, and proud to say that that has grown. We have a blood center here in San Francisco. We just celebrated its 1-year birthday a couple months ago, its 1-year anniversary, and we're thrilled to give the opportunity for blood donors to donate 6 days a week here in San Francisco. I then joined our development team here in San Francisco, being able to fundraise to make sure our mission is possible. I did that in the year that we had Hurricane Harvey, Irma, Maria, Hurricane Nate. We had the Las Vegas shooting that the Red Cross responded to. And then just when we thought we could relax and take a deep breath, we caught on fire up in the North Bay. So that was a crazy year, but again, proud of the work that the Red Cross did. And again, we can't do that without our partners and our faith-based partners. I then relocated to Portland, Oregon, and served as our regional volunteer services officer. And that's where I got to see and work alongside our volunteers. I went on our first disaster action team, our DAT call, and that's where the fire department puts a fire out and our volunteers meet folks who are displaced and give them somewhere safe to stay, a comfort kit that includes a toothbrush, deodorant, mouthwash, a razor, just some of those bare necessity items that folks need when they lose everything. And went on my first deployment. I actually went up to, speaking of earthquakes, up to Alaska to the earthquake they had there. We had a blizzard that hit Oregon. I've gone to wildfires. The disasters just continue and continue. And then the last 3 years, I moved to upstate New York. And as you can imagine, being born and raised in California, I was not ready for the snow. I had to buy a Subaru to get through 3 very long winters. The locals say that the winters were mild, but this California boy was overwhelmed by the snow and needed that 4-wheel drive to get through the winters. And I've been in this role as regional CEO for 3 months now. And it's just a joy to be back and to reconnect with so many friends and partners over the years. I want to just give a little bit of background. My dad is Jordanian. He's Greek Orthodox. My mom is Nicaraguan. And I had the privilege of going to Jordan in 2012 and in 2014. And in 2012, I connected with a Jordanian Red Crescent volunteer who did an internship with the Red Cross here out of our San Francisco office. And I reached out to him and said, would love to see you. It's been a while. It would be great to connect. And he was studying abroad, but his dad was the president of the Red Crescent in Jordan and had the opportunity to present him with an American Red Cross t-shirt and American Red Cross pin. It just goes to show our, the national movement and network of the Red Cross in just about every single country out there. But it was just great to be there. I also spent some time in Israel to see the Holy Land and just absolutely loved that experience. So transitioning over to the mission of the Red Cross, we are here to help alleviate and prevent human suffering during emergencies. And we're only able to do that through our volunteers and the generosity of our donors. We are a nonprofit, and 90% of our workforce are volunteers. I deployed to a wildfire about a month ago up north to the mountain and the mill fire in Wairika and was reporting to a volunteer. Our volunteers have very senior positions and leadership positions and opportunities, and just again shows the power of our organization. We are impacting the community in so many different ways, and we'll talk about our different lines of service and then some of the partnerships that we have with our faith-based organizations. But this chart just shows the many impacts that we do on a daily basis, helping people here in San Francisco and across our region and across the world. We have a very big focus on diversity, something that I'm very proud of. We want to make sure that when we're responding to disasters, that we're reflective of the community that we're serving. So we're always looking for a diverse workforce with volunteers with different languages, backgrounds, religions, you name it. We want to celebrate diversity, make sure we're representing the community that we're serving. Again, we talked about 90% of our volunteers being, 90% of our workforce being volunteers, so very, very proud of that. With our disaster relief efforts, and I know we've worked with many folks in faith-based organizations, we talk about disasters in a cycle. We like to prepare people. We do that with our elementary school students. We do a pillowcase program where we go into schools and teach youth about what to have in an emergency kit. We give them a pillowcase that they're able to decorate. And our hope is that they go home, talk to their parents about the exciting things they learned about, and start that emergency kit, start making that plan and practicing that at home. We have a Pedro the Penguin program that we do with younger kids as well, where we talk about emergency preparedness and have local hazards, and again, spark that action when they go home with their parents. For adults, we go into vulnerable communities and install free smoke alarms. And in addition to those smoke alarms that we install, we talk about preparedness information. We talk about being prepared for earthquakes like the one we had this week, being prepared for home fires and wildfires. We talk about, escape plans and just the importance with all that. We also respond to disasters. Many of you know the big ones, most recently Hurricane Ian. We have 40 volunteers from our region in Northern California currently in Florida helping support the relief efforts and recovery efforts in Florida for Hurricane Ian. And again, every single night in our region, about 2 or 3 times a night, we're responding to a home fire where the fire department calls us and we help folks get through that night and get through the first couple days and start the recovery process. And again, we're doing this during people's darkest moments. They have just lost everything, and we're there. We want to make sure their basic needs are met. For big disasters, we get people out of harm's way and shelter them, make sure they have warm meals. We have volunteers, spiritual volunteers that help them through that. We have mental health volunteers, health services volunteers that may help someone refill a prescription or medical equipment that may have been left behind as people evacuate. We also help with financial assistance to aid that recovery process as folks are going through the recovery. And we do help the most vulnerable people. The shelter I was at in Northern California in Wairika is a good example. People who are financially able to, or have family or friends in the area, they'll go stay with them if they're displaced. But the folks we see in our shelters are the most vulnerable. People who financially can't stay in a hotel for a period of time while a disaster is taking place. That shelter I was in Wairika had residents that were in their 90 years old, and they literally had nowhere else to go but a Red Cross shelter. And I'm going to show a quick video. I did share my sound. We had the vice mayor of one of our local towns up north who was in our shelter, lost everything, and we learned that it was his birthday and were able to celebrate and make his day a little bit brighter. So I'm going to share that quick video.
You guys can join me in wishing Stacy a happy 21st birthday. We'll sing on 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Stacy. Happy birthday to you.
Oh my gosh, this is the best. It's carrot cake.
So we learned that it was Stacy's birthday while he was in the shelter. Again, he had nowhere to go but to stay in our shelter, and was very grateful, and carrot cake is his favorite. One of the new and exciting things that we are focusing on as an organization and as a region is the fact that extreme weather is really affecting our work. We are responding to more disasters. They're happening more often. They're more intense, and it's definitely impacting our work. Our volunteers are being deployed more. There's a constant need for volunteers. And just a couple stats, 40% of Americans live in counties hit by climate disasters. In Northern California, we look at counties like Butte and Lake counties that consistently have wildfires. We're adapting our mission to be able to support these communities. A good example is Puerto Rico. When we raise funds for a disaster and folks designate it, we make sure we honor that donor's intent, and we're providing those funds to those relief efforts. We had some leftover funds for some of the past operations in Puerto Rico, so we invested in some solar panels that were able to be used this year during Hurricane Fiona that folks had access to when Fiona hit and there was no power on the island. And that's a direct result of the Red Cross and our generous donors. We talked again about the home fires. That's the #1 disaster that we're responding to. We do look, and just recently we worked with Holy Names of Jesus Parish for a Sound the Alarm event in the Sunset to do a Sound the Alarm event where we go door to door, install those smoke alarms about a week before we go out and do some canvassing to let people know who we are and to let us in to do those smoke alarms, so it's not stranger danger. And they're welcoming us in, but we work with one of our partners for that. We supply 40% of the nation's blood. Again, I'm really proud to say that we have our blood center in San Francisco open 6 days a week at our office at Market and Goff. And one of the things that has happened through COVID is that we are seeing less African-American donors come out and donate blood. And the reason why it's alarming for us is because of sickle cell disease. It affects the African-American community the most, and then the Latino, and then the Asian community. And we're asking folks from those ethnic backgrounds to roll up their sleeves and donate blood, because there is no cure to sickle cell disease. The therapy when someone goes into crisis is a blood transfusion, and it's best for someone within their community to donate. It's best for the best match for those patients. So we are asking folks to help us bridge the gap for sickle cell disease. And every 2 seconds, someone in the United States needs blood. It could be a baby at birth, a mother giving birth, an innocent person in a car accident, a burn victim, someone just getting a routine surgery. So the need for blood is real. It's constant. We're doing blood drives all over the San Francisco area, and a great way for us to partner with our faith-based organizations. We support our military. Right now in Northern California, our military entrance processing center is in San Jose, but we do work with the VA in San Francisco, supporting our military members. And we do this through their whole life cycle. When they first enter the military, we do a get to know us session, letting them know what we do, preparing them as service members, preparing their family. We respond during happy times and difficult times, whether it's a service member who's overseas and somebody's at home giving birth, or there's a death. We help reunify families and connect to them during those difficult times. And then as folks come back into civilization, we help do some resiliency workshops to help them acclimate back to being a civilian. We teach life-saving skills like CPR, first aid, AED. Another great thing we do is babysitting training that we do. It's a certification. It might be great for some of the younger parishioners. Again, we help vulnerable communities around the world. We work with our Red Cross and Red Crescent societies across the world, helping eradicate diseases like measles and rubella. We help disaster preparedness. When there's a big disaster in another country, we touch base with the sister society and ask, what do they need? Whether it's funds, whether it's supplies, food, water, whether it's expertise. Sometimes we'll deploy folks from the US to go out and help recovery for our country that's needed. So that was a lot of information about what we do. And again, we have some rich partnerships with our faith-based organizations in San Francisco and across the region, and wanted to highlight a couple opportunities for folks to get involved with our mission. If you're able to and your congregation is interested, we'd love to host a blood drive or just promoting the general need for blood. Again, our office in San Francisco is open 6 days a week. It's a blood center that collects platelets, plasma, and red blood cells, and a great way to give back and partner with us. And again, there are many faith-based organizations that are already doing blood drives, and a huge thank you to those. We'd love for you to share volunteer opportunities and preparedness opportunities. Sometimes we look for volunteers to do an event similar to the Sound the Alarm where we install those free smoke alarms. And for that, you don't have to be a registered Red Cross volunteer. We'd love for folks to join, but it is more of an event for folks to come out one day and volunteer with us to be an educator, to educate folks on emergency preparedness, to be an installer, to install that smoke alarm. And then we look for Red Cross volunteers to be preparedness volunteers to help educate, do those pillowcase projects, do Pedro the Penguin out in the schools. We also have the opportunity to do a Be Red Cross Ready presentation for your congregation on our local hazards, on earthquakes, wildfires, home fires, on talking about having a kit, what to have in a kit, about making a plan, practicing that plan, and staying informed. So some great opportunities for folks to volunteer or for us to come out to your congregation and share important preparedness information. And we're always looking for establishing these partnerships now, what we call in blue skies, non-disaster time, and places that may be a shelter location. We come out and do an agreement. We just make sure things are ADA accessible. There's running water, preferably a kitchen, and some of those important items so that when a disaster hits, we have that relationship in place and we're able to activate pretty quickly. And again, just wanted to highlight some of these partnership opportunities with our faith-based organizations and thank the relationships that we already have. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Hanna, thank you. This is very, very important. And I just wanted to share that by day's end today, this recording link, your slide deck, and any other resource links that either you or Heather, who will be coming on in just a moment, would like to share will be distributed to our 5,600 e-subscribers who will watch this in, at a convenient time. The one thing that I'm very, very glad that you highlighted on at the end was the necessity to have these relationships in place before the crisis happens. We are very, very blessed to work with the Red Cross. And I think a lot of other relationships blossomed after Hurricane Katrina because we had a lot of refugees from New Orleans relocating, especially to the Bayview district. And at that point, we knew that we really needed to kick into gear and prepare because here we are in earthquake country. At that time, we were the first fiscal sponsor for an organization that was emerging called San Francisco Community Agencies Responding to Disaster, SF CARD. And at the same time, we started hosting every other year with a different theme. And climate change was one year of disaster preparedness workshops for congregations. And we did this in concert with the Red Cross, the Department of Emergency Management, but also SF CARD, because they had unique capacities to do trainings at congregations and also to set up disaster plans. These relationships are very, very important, especially in this earthquake country that we find ourselves, because we're told that we're going to be isolated for 72 hours should the big one come. And with that, we have been encouraging our congregations in neighborhoods to establish relationships because the expectation, as I mentioned at the outset, is that our houses of worship are going to be open for business, to shelter, and to offer food and pastoral care. So those disaster plans are very important, and we are very grateful to SF CARD for their contributions. And finally, just at a regional scope, you spent a lot of time talking about the North Bay fires. That's when we realized that we could not function in silos, but we really needed to function in collaboration with our partners, because the humanitarian aid organizations that were headquartered in San Francisco were wanting to foster relationships in Sonoma County and in Marin, where the evacuees were presenting themselves. So all of that said, I think basically trying to illustrate that the Interfaith Council, with its 800 communities of faith and religious institutions, is here to support, assist, and to cultivate relationships with the Red Cross. But at this time, I'd like to introduce another partner, Heather Lee, who has just been integral to our work, to respond to your presentation and ask you a couple of questions. Heather, it's great to see you again. Thank you for always saying yes and answering the call. And I'm going to turn the floor over to you at this point.
I always will answer the call, Michael. I would probably answer the call while on vacation, but maybe I shouldn't tell you that. I am always grateful to be here, and I always feel honored when you think of me and reach out and ask me if I will present or respond, which I love to do. Hannah, it's so nice to meet you. I am so grateful to have your leadership right now in our local chapter of the American Red Cross. I got to say, I was a disaster responder while you were in development, which is perhaps why our paths never crossed at the time. And, you know, I know as volunteers, we don't say thank you to development enough. So I want to really publicly right now lift up and say thank you. I was there for Harvey. I was there for the Clayton fire. I ran the Ghost Ship fire response for the American Red Cross, which was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And we can't do that. We volunteers cannot do that without development out there talking to the American public, its people, all the time. I remind people that the Red Cross is not a branch of the government. It is you and me and Michael, everyone on this call, everyone who listens to this, grandmas writing little checks. I've helped open those envelopes in the office before for those $5 donations. That's the powerhouse behind the ability of the Red Cross to do all of what it does. That and all of the congregations and organizations that step up and partner, those partnerships are really where it is. That was a thing I really learned. SF Card, who I work for now, has long been a partner with the American Red Cross. Probably most beautifully, what I always heard as a volunteer, my executive director, Brian, was always sitting in the Emergency Operations Center right next to the Red Cross representative, making sure that our faith communities, our service organizations were an integral part of any response that was happening in San Francisco. There's a long history there, and I'm really grateful that it just keeps going on and on. I want to highlight and push you to expand on those ways that the faith community can partner with the Red Cross, with Sound the Alarm, with blood donations, sheltering evacuation centers. Because I'm going to say, you put your email on the bottom of that slide. Do you really want all of us from all of the counties? And it is more than just San Francisco or even like the local Bay Area. So many people watch these and respond to these. Do you really want all of us emailing you directly? I know you're busy.
Yeah, absolutely. I put my email on there. I've got an open door policy. These partnerships are absolutely critical. I will have someone on my team, depending on what way folks want to partner, whether it's a shelter location, hosting a blood drive, you want us to come out and do a presentation, you're interested in Sound the Alarm, I would love to connect you with someone on our team to get you to the right place. So please do reach out to me. My email, hanna.malak@redcross.org, and again, is on the slides.
Awesome, thank you. People always do that. They'll put their email, and I know myself, I'm like, I don't know. So I really wanted to highlight that, or really push you to like send out afterward, like, here's who to connect with at the various counties or whatever. So thank you for that. You'll be hearing from me. The other thing that you mentioned, again, this is on how to connect. You mentioned opportunities for volunteers without being a full disaster responder. And how do we know about those? I want to be able to share that and promote that through my network. And having been a Red Cross volunteer, like, I don't know about this. How am I missing out? How do I get on this list so that I can share those opportunities through my network? And my network is just a network of other networks. So how do I share that?
Yes, that's a great question. A lot of our volunteer opportunities do require folks to be registered volunteers. We do a background check and all that. I will touch base with Allison, our disaster program manager, who covers San Francisco and make sure your email and then anyone else who reaches out for those kind of day of or event-based volunteer opportunities know when we have those installs and other events, because we'd love to engage folks in those opportunities. I
know Allison really, really well. I can bug her myself so she doesn't feel as though she got put on the spot for that. So it's going to so this is just this, I guess what I want to clarify, this would just be Allison or whoever my local, rep for whatever county would be reaching out to me. This isn't a list that's an opportunity for me to share with my network something larger, because that's what I really want to know how to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Allison's kind of the point person for those more event-based events, those smoke alarm events. So getting the information from her, open to any and all. We do look for folks to be at least 18, unless they're accompanied by one of their parents or guardians to do those smoke alarm installations. But please, by all means, please do share those opportunities.
Okay, I will. I will reach out to Allison about that. On your point about being at 18 or with a parent, I noticed in your presentation you didn't talk about Red Cross clubs, just a little bit in your own experience. Can you tell us more about those? Are there opportunities for for our religious schools to have those chapters as well? Could you talk a little bit more about those and what that opportunity presents?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have clubs at our high schools, even some elementary schools and our colleges, and they're able to engage our mission. We look for folks to be at least 13 to be an official Red Cross volunteer. We do have a youth lead, a youth liaison who helps clubs get organized, find out what they want to accomplish throughout the year, and make sure they have the resources to be successful. Sometimes it's a club hosting a blood drive, preparedness information, CPR classes, fundraisers, just lots of ways to engage with us. Our youth volunteers make great presenters for Pedro the Penguin, for Pillowcase, going into those elementary schools to do those preparedness presentations. And again, just by reaching out, we can get you in touch to officially get that club going. We've got some great resources to get you started with a club charter, all that good stuff, and to get you officially registered in our system.
Yeah, I will say I started out as logistics for San Francisco disaster, and I worked with Red Cross clubs from San Mateo to come and organize things. And I've got to tell you, they were better than the Salesforce people that had previously organized those supplies. And I had to have 13 to 18-year-olds come and reorganize them. So I will give a plug. It is a great opportunity for kids to learn how to become volunteers, which is something we really do. We have to be taught how to connect that volunteerism in our lives on a daily basis. And I just want to plug the Red Cross as a great way for youth to do that. And not everybody knows about those clubs or has those. So
yeah, it's great leadership building as well. We train folks on how to facilitate meetings, and great resume building for our youth. And those are our future leaders. I started out as a Red Cross youth at Menlo College, although I didn't feel so youthful, and I don't anymore. But our youth are the future of our organization.
I have far more gray hair than you. All right, those are mine. Michael, are there any questions from the chat, perhaps, or
I'm going to ask you to stay on the line, Heather. I had a couple of just thoughts, and because when I got started, confession is good for the soul. I was a board member for the Red Cross for a period of time, and when I first started this job 15 years ago, the blood drive portion of the Red Cross was distinct from the humanitarian. And I'm really glad to see that they've come together, because I think they go hand in hand. As I remember, I think that our LDS community, as well as the Roman Catholic Church, the Archdiocese, was really critically involved in those drives. Can you talk a little bit to that, Hanna?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to touch on, 30, 40 years ago, we were really unified internally as the One Red Cross. And, we're regulated by the FDA, and there's a big focus on quality, and we kind of separated. We call it the Great Divorce. We were divorced as an organization, and really just had our blood services focus on quality and making sure we were doing everything right, because safety is our top priority. And we're really moving towards that One Red Cross. I say we're dating now. We were divorced, now we're back to dating. And we have integrated our fleet, our facilities, our communications team, and are really operating as the One Red Cross, because to you all, we are the Red Cross, right? Even though we've got different departments within our organization. And one good example, and I apologize for not bringing this up earlier, I totally meant to, is the month of July and the month of December are very difficult times for us to collect blood. Schools aren't in session, people are traveling, and the need for blood stays the same, but our donations go down. And we partnered with the LDS Church and other interfaith, other faith-based groups to host interfaith blood drives in the month of July. And that helped bridge our gap of donations throughout the summer. So there's a really rich history and partnership there. And again, I apologize for not bringing it up early, but we're very grateful for that partnership.
I wanted to mention, when the pandemic began, we've been preparing for an earthquake, but the crises take different forms. Everything, as you mentioned, extreme weather. I mean, we have gotten very involved with security and houses of worship in the aftermath of terrorist attacks, and have done symposia on that. But we worked very closely with SF CARD during the pandemic, and Heather ran a program for, and I'd like you to take a moment to talk about that program and our collaboration. And after Heather's done, I was wondering if you might share, Hanna, with us, the Red Cross's role during the pandemic. Heather?
This is good practice for me. Really brief plug. And I'll share some more information about it in a follow-up email that Cynthia can send out. Next week is the Preparedness Summit being hosted by the UWASI, Urban Area Securities Initiative. And I will
tell us what UWASI is, because when I started this,
oh gosh, sorry,
I'm not good with acronyms.
Thank you. I work with them all the time. I am absolutely guilty of everyone else of not seeing them anymore as acronyms. Okay. The Bay Area Urban Area Security Initiative, the BAUWASI, is now its own word. Is the organization, the collaboration that receives federal Homeland Security /FEMA /CISA, all these other things. It's the disaster, and it's all kinds of disaster monies. We do all kinds of things at the UWASI. I mostly work in the training and education and exercise area. The Preparedness Summit next week is going to have an exercise. We're going to practice and walk through how to respond to a pandemic. We're going to pick not COVID and see if we can, start thinking about this in not COVID ways, so that we can actually take the lessons that we've learned and be able to apply them in the future. And I will be on a panel in the afternoon as part of that exercise. And then the next day, the next 2 days will be what would be most of interest to people on this call would be what's called the Mass Communication Seminar. It's a series of panels and talks and keynote speakers on those topics of how do we communicate with our jurisdictions, that would be like a county or a city, with the clients that we have, with our organizations, our faith communities, all of those networks. How do we communicate disaster information? It sounds kind of boring, and I'm not very good at describing it. It turns out it's absolutely fascinating once you sit there. And we don't have a lot of opportunities to get together physically with people and have that interaction. And we hosted it again last year after the couple of years hiatus. And it was the highlight of my year to be able to come back together with people. And I'm very much looking forward to it next year. That aside, that isn't even a question you asked me.
No, yeah. You were entrusted with a huge grant.
I was. During COVID, and I will be honest and fair, we did not receive this grant because of COVID. We received this grant, and then COVID appeared after the fact. We had a huge grant from the state of California to do general, what we call all hazard preparedness education. And this grant, Listos, California. And I'm pleased to say that we have another much smaller grant for Listos this year as well, in conjunction with a couple of other organizations in San Francisco. And they've broadened it across much more of California. But the Listos grant was that, I don't want to say it's the first, but I want to say it's the most intentional push by educators in preparedness to make sure that we are reaching people where they are, and from the perspective of their, their capacity. Listos materials were created in 21 different languages. We'll probably create a couple more this year in this iteration. Like, that's outrageous. Usually it's like, oh, it's in Spanish, how shocking. So to have that information in so many different languages, to look at the needs of migrant farm workers, and then what do they actually need to hear, learn, and understand about disaster preparedness, that's going to be different than, say, for instance, because this is where I did a lot of work, our community in Chinatown in San Francisco. They're having a very different experience. They have really different needs. Being able to really focus that information on where they are and what's going to make the most difference in terms of being prepared for a pandemic, maybe, but an earthquake, thanks to our most recent reminder, has been absolutely fantastic. And what I did with that huge amount of money that I was entrusted with was reach out to as many different organizations as I possibly could. I worked with 30, cut checks for, worked with more than that, 34 different organizations in San Francisco during the pandemic to reach them wherever they were. One of those grants was with the Interfaith Council, and being able to use this forum that the Interfaith Council prepared to reach not just people in San Francisco, like, who attends these calls and then who they talk to afterwards. But I know that these spread far and wide. These go much farther. I hear backstories of people that are far outside of San Francisco that know about these, have watched presentations, have been forwarded them and say, hey, watch this, this is great. What else would you like me to say, Michael?
I think okay. That's the ground. And I guess, I wanted Hanna to have a little time to think about his response. One of our board members, Norman Fong, is on this line. And I think if I gave him the microphone, he would say, what is the Red Cross doing in Chinatown? And are there things in different languages? Are there resources in different languages? And so I would put that to you, Hanna, and to know that we're here as resources to support you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And to your first question around the pandemic, and our mission is very important. So we had to pivot to a virtual platform for a lot of our mission, but it continued. Our blood supply was interesting because, as you can imagine, schools were closing, businesses were closing, and our job was to try to get as many blood drives on the books. That involved us opening up cafeterias and offices at Red Cross places. So for a minute, our blood supply was very low. And then the Surgeon General got on the megaphone and said, it's safe, it's essential to donate blood, and folks were coming out, which was amazing to see. And just as that was happening, hospitals were stopping elective surgeries to focus on COVID. People were staying home, so there were less car accidents, less need for blood. So we did something kind of special. We gave our staff, our phlebotomists, a special day off because they were working like crazy to catch up for the low blood supply, and gave them a special day off twice a month so as demand went down. And then just as we thought it was down, things started opening up a little bit quicker than we thought, and demand went right back. Hospitals were catching up on elective surgery. So it's kind of a yo-yo, but we did so safely. We made sure masks were required. We were socially distancing. We were cleaning equipment throughout the pandemic, taking temperatures at the beginning of the pandemic. So we had adapted our mission to be safe. For our home fires, we were still responding, but we were doing so on a virtual platform and helping clients through that recovery process. And then we worked with our fire departments who were going into homes and giving them smoke alarms to install on our behalf, since we didn't want to go into folks' homes, and folks weren't comfortable with that. But if there was a need for a fire department to be going in for a call, so we pivoted our platform. We are now Zoom experts. I think I've been on more Zoom meetings and conference calls than in the past. But again, our mission, we pivoted, but again, our mission continued strong. And to your point about San Francisco and the different communities, we are working on this national tool that we're actually piloting to translate to 40 different languages and dialects, the top 40 most used. And we know the diversity that we have here in San Francisco. So we're very excited to be piloting that, to be able to get our tools and resources into those different languages and into the hands of the community that we serve. So be on the lookout for some of those materials very, very soon.
Wonderful. There is, in the course of our conversation at the chapel 2 weeks ago, you mentioned something that was of great interest to me, because there is this expectation that our communities of faith are going to be open for business and be able to shelter and offer food and pastoral care in times of crises. And I just want to commend SF CARD for putting together disaster plans so that they can be resilient. But you had mentioned MOUs, memos of understanding, and how you're upgrading that. Can you speak to that for just a moment? Because I know that it would be helpful to a number of our communities of faith, and we're glad to make those introductions, if they knew what the expectations would be and what that relationship would look like.
Absolutely. And we try to do this as much as possible now during blue sky, non-disaster times, of having these shelter agreements in place where we go out, we do what we call a shelter survey. We go out and just measure square footage. We make sure to see if there's a kitchen available, bathrooms. We want to make sure sites are ADA accessible, so that if the need arises, we will reach out to folks and say, there's a need for a shelter within this community. And that could be, a multifamily fire or a big, apartment complex, or a bigger disaster like an earthquake or a fire. But we want to have those relationships and those agreements in hand now. By no means is it an absolute commitment. We've worked with some places and there is a big wedding or a first communion and other things that don't work. And that's why it's important for us to have so many partnerships in the community and with our faith-based partners. But at least having that in ahead of time, we'll be able to research our facility agreement and know how many cots we may be able to put up with social distancing, how many stations we may be able to put up, doing that in advance versus setting it up in moments notice during a disaster. So we try to be as proactive as possible for that.
Well, that is good to know, because there was a period of time, anytime there'd be a fire in the city, I would get a call and say, we need shelter space. And to have these MOUs in place prior to is critical, and that these congregations understand the expectations is equally critical. And we would like to continue to work with you on that. I was just wondering, Heather, if you want to talk just for a moment about either your trainings or disaster planning, because I think that this is really important for the congregations to be aware of.
Thank you. One of the things I'm sitting here making a note is I've recently updated our template for houses of worship. It's a disaster plan, in a bucket. It's got all those questions that you need to ask, things you need to think about. And I've recently updated that to make sure that it includes those lessons that we've learned from a pandemic, because, I spent all of 2020 apologizing for not having pandemic planning as part of the disasters that I was sharing about for everyone. I think that unfortunately was quite common for so many of us in this field. And so I will absolutely share that with you to send out afterwards to everyone. It's one of those things. It's I like to describe it as, disaster nerds. We have people who get very interested in this topic. It can be a hobby or it can be a career for some of us. And that person will often lead the charge on building those relationships, making sure that planning is in place, making sure that those supplies are in place. And when that person moves on, from our congregation or our organization in general, because that was other duties as assigned is my favorite phrase, because that was someone's passion, it's not part of someone else's job description, and it gets lost, and those relationships get lost. And I will be really blunt here and tell Hanna how it is. There's those agreements that we've written down on paper, but the ones that we really call on as disaster responders are the ones that are actually programmed in our phone. And so keeping those relationships alive in that Facebook kind of way, remembering to reach out once a year and say, to find out if that phone number still works. Is that person still there? Sometimes it is the lead. It will almost always be a leader of the congregation or the faith community, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is the pastor or it is the head of the board, so to speak. They're all called different things, but they're basically boards. Making sure that relationship stays alive. It's really fun when you reach out as a Red Cross responder to an organization and no one there's ever heard of you and has no idea that you're there. I have had the privilege of chasing down Red Cross sheltering supplies in churches across San Francisco. This was quite a few years ago. And several of the churches had no idea that those supplies were there, or that they belonged to the Red Cross, and that there were obligations connected with that. So that's a thing that needs a lot of maintenance that we don't always think about. Making sure that planning is part of the life of our congregation and not just the purview of someone who has a deep passion for it.
I think if you have hit on something, it's that it takes a village. And these cross-sector partnerships are so critical. A last word, Hanna?
No, just Heather, you make some very valid points, and that's why we're trying to be as proactive as possible. Construction happens where folks, an elevator doesn't work anymore, or an elevator was added, something that may not have been ideal before. So lots change, and really affirms the point to visit those sites and those relationships regularly.
And we can work together to keep those MOUs current. And let you know when there are transitions going on in congregations, and that is part of our partnership, if you will, in disaster preparedness. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be with us. I know this is the beginning of a conversation and the beginning of fostering new relationships. 3 months, it feels like you've been here 3 years, but we are here to support you. And I want to say a special thank you to Heather for coming on board too. I wanted the two of you to get together, and I know that this is just the beginning of a collaboration between your organizations. Also want to thank Hala, who had to jump off a little quickly, and to Cynthia Zambucas and Trey Russell Allen for their technical and communication support to make these programs possible. We would invite you to join us next Thursday, November 3rd, at 8:30 a.m. when we welcome San Francisco Human Rights Commission Executive Director Cheryl Davis, who's going to speak to the Commission's work as it relates to outreach to our city's BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color. We are working in particular, the Council is on making sure that they have access to the vaccines. And so I think that this lay of the land that Cheryl is going to be able to give us next week will be critical. Thank you all for joining us, and please share this recording link that will come out later today with your constituents and your social media networks. That concludes our program for the day. God bless you and God keep you.